Hello, and welcome to today's presentation. My name is Tracy Belfield. I'm a field training coordinator with the Kentucky Autism Training Center. I'm really excited to have you here today. Our topic is Reframing Autism, Collaborating to Help Students on the Spectrum Thrive in College. So let me tell you a little bit about how we came to train on this topic. We have seen an increase in autism as prevalence rates are going up. And thus colleges are starting to see that increase, and we've had several community colleges reach out to ask for training. I actually had gotten a call from our local community college because some of their safety and security people had attended our first responder training and thought that it was very well put together and that the college as a whole could benefit from the training. They also had been seeing an increase in calls from faculty and staff on what they classified as odd and unusual behavior. So the head of their security and safety thought it would be a good idea for them to be trained on autism, for staff to have a better understanding, because many of the people that they had encountered had happened to be on the spectrum. And so that's kind of how we got to today's topic, and is why you will see a few police type videos in there, but hopefully you'll be able to see how they apply to you in the classroom as well. Again, I'm really excited that you're here today, so let's get started. Our objectives today will be how you will be able to identify the characteristics associated with autism spectrum disorder. I also want you to be able to identify the KCTCS and community resources that we have for students with autism spectrum disorder. And I want you to be able to apply those strategies for educating students with autism spectrum disorder within your classrooms. Before we dig into autism specifically, let's take a broader look at neurodiversity. As we move through this training today, I want you to keep reminding yourself
Just like our
that
fingerprints, all our brains are unique.
Just different. It's not
But
a right
for the
or wrong
majority
thing.
of people,
We
their
are
brains
all
are
different,
similar enough
and we
that
need
there
to
are largely
embrace
no
that.
obvious
We need to
differences in how
celebrate
they
our
function.
strengths and talents that
They
we
have
bring to the
differences
table.
in things like skills,
I often liken
preferences,
it
and
to
styles.
cell phone users.
But
Some of
mostly,
us are iPhone
their brains
users,
mean they
some of us
perceive
are
the world
Android
in the same
users.
way. But for
The
others, their
phones
brains are more
themselves still
fundamentally
do
different.
kind of what phones
They have
do.
differences
They call people,
in
they
things
text
like
people,
social
we're able
understanding,
to download apps and stuff.
sensory
Their
processing,
operating systems are just a
communication,
little bit different,
and
how they do
information
things is just
processing.
a little bit different. But they're
These
still phones
differences
and they
are
still
a result
perform
of
the overall
neurological
same
differences,
functions.
such as
It's the same
autism,
thing with people with
ADHD, dyslexia,
neurodiversities.
and
They
more.
just do things and perceive the world a
This
little
natural
bit different.
variation in our brains
Again, not
is
a right or
called
wrong thing. So this
neurodiversity.
video does a great
Those
job
of us with
kind
no
of explaining that a
neurological
little bit
conditions
more. So
are
let's
neurotypical,
play.
and those of us with neurological conditions
See what they have
are
to say.
neurodivergent. Neurodivergent people think differently. Their unique perspectives and experiences mean they can often excel at creativity and innovation, have highly specialised skill sets, and an ability to hyperfocus. If embraced, this can be a huge advantage to organisations and society. However, the differences neurodivergent people experience can make life challenging. In order to thrive at work, they often need some simple accommodations. For example, a sensory calm environment to recharge in, or a routine with the same start and end times. Approximately 1 in 7 people are neurodivergent, so not only is embracing neurodiversity critical for a truly inclusive organisation, but it also presents organisations with a huge opportunity.
So as we move through today's training, I really want you to keep reminding yourself that different is not wrong. It's just simply different. Um, and with that, we all have different strengths and talents that we bring to the table. I often liken it to, I'm an iPhone person and my husband is an Android person. Our phones overall still answer our calls, send texts. We have very similar apps. So really, they're kind of getting the overall things still done, but their operating system is just different. Again, there might be some people who debate whether iPhones or Androids are better, but in all honesty, they're still a phone, and we just need to respect them for what they have to offer. And so with doing that, we really want to kind of have those neurodiversity affirming practices. And so this slide really just kind of shows how you, again, can embrace those differences. And again, we've got to examine our own biases. We all have them, so we need to be aware of them and make sure that we're not pushing our biases onto anyone else. Make sure that we're prioritizing those lived experiences. Again, we're challenging those biases that we may have. Active collaboration. If you've never met an autistic individual, I encourage you, or anybody really that's neurodiverse, get out there, engage with them, try to really get to understand them, and just, collaborate with different agencies and stuff to deepen your understanding. Again, validate those differences, understand that we're all different, and that that's okay, and that we can view things differently. That's kind of what makes the world go round. Promote self-advocacy. Our young adults really need to understand that they can stand up for themselves and speak up for what they need, really focusing on the strengths that each individual has, and then of course just kind of raising that awareness. Again, I'm a big believer in really focusing on those strengths and kind of building from that. Also, another big piece is really presuming competence. And again, sometimes we've got to check that in with our biases that we have, but really knowing that every human is capable of learning. So this next slide kind of talks about how neurodiverse conditions are really not that rare. It really does affect millions of Americans. So here it says 15 to 20% of Americans have some type of language-based learning disability. A lot of these are dyslexia in nature, but again, that's a huge percentage. 4.4% of American adults are diagnosed with attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder, also known as ADHD. It does seem to be diagnosed more commonly in men. That third one there talks about autism. I'm not going to go into that one right yet because we're about to get a little deeper into autism. But then also to be aware that 30 to 40% unemployment rate among our neurodiverse population. That's just sad, to be quite honest, and so we all need to be kind of doing our part to help kind of normalize some of this, and again, seeing the strengths and the potential and presuming competence to get these people into the workforce and into the right positions. And so as community colleges, you guys have a great ability to affect that change. So, curious, take a minute. Do you have any idea what the prevalence rate of autism currently is? Well, just this past April in 2022, the new rates came out, and they look at 8-year-olds when they do that study, and it is now 1 in 36. Yeah, that's pretty astonishing. So, of course, that is why we are talking about it. I mean, those numbers just keep growing. We do see it diagnosed about 4 times higher in boys than girls. Autism, again, affects individuals across their lifespan. So autism is not something that you're going to cure or outgrow. It's, again, going to be something that they have their whole life. They may learn better coping mechanisms, Some individuals learn masking techniques to not make their autism as obvious to the outside world. But again, if we're doing more neuro affirming practices, hopefully they won't feel the need to mask as much, because that takes a lot of energy from them as well. And also with autism, there is no visible physical characteristics of it. So you can't just look at an individual or a still picture of a person and go, oh, they have autism, just by looking at them. Now, if you watch them for a while, again, you may see some characteristics that lean you to wonder if they have autism, but it's kind of that invisible disability where there are no physical characteristics that are going to be obvious. Autism also affects all races, ethnicities, social economic groups. Really, there's no group that is not impacted by the diagnosis of autism. One other piece I want to mention while we're on this slide is that autism does not affect IQ. So there are people on the autism spectrum disorder with very high IQs, quote unquote average IQs, and then there are individuals with low IQs. So again, we kind of see that spectrum of that. And so, of course, here on that second bullet point, you're seeing the number of autistic individuals that are aging out of school or graduating high school currently. So obviously a big number, and again, a reason that community colleges and other places are starting to see an increase of individuals that they are serving. So again, another reason that we are talking about this topic today. So as we get into this, let's talk a little bit about some terminology. So the first thing I want to talk about is person first language. So that would typically be when I would say a individual with autism. And so I'm really labeling the person first, the individual, and then the disability later. That used to kind of be the standard practice, I'll be honest. I was a classroom teacher for years, and when I went through college and through the educational system, that was really pounded into our head. A lot of federal language is still written that way as well. But as autistic individuals have grown and have gotten more of a voice, and we've started to actually listen to them, we have found out that they really kind of own that autism diagnosis, that they believe it is a very central part of who they are, and so they prefer that identity first language, so that would be more of an autistic individual. So I have really tried to switch my language and be more identity first, but I do have a tendency to kind of go back and forth between the two when I'm teaching. Because in my audience, I may have a large percentage that prefer that identity first language, but I may still have some that prefer that person first language. So that's one reason. And of course, I'm still trying to break some very bad habits that I learned early on in my career. But when you're interacting with a person one-on-one, best practice, just kind of ask them what they prefer, what type of language, and then try to honor that the best that you can. Another thing with terminology is you will hear nonverbal and non-speaking. Ultimately, they mean the same thing. But again, as the autism community has had more voice in what they're saying, they have come to say that they really prefer the language of non-speaking. And as speech paths, I think, have learned more, they've decided that that is also a better kind of label to kind of define their abilities. Because a lot of times with nonverbal, it's kind of interpreted of, oh, they don't understand any language at all, and therefore we kind of treat them worse than we really should. Not that we should treat anybody poorly, but people just make those assumptions that they don't have the capacity to really understand what's going on. So we may talk about the individual in front of them, which is obviously very wrong and not very dignity protecting to them. To where with non-speaking, it really kind of suggests that they can communicate. They just have other ways that they do that, and that they can understand language. And so we need to be very mindful with that. I also want to kind of remind you that just because a person is typically speaking, so again, students in your classroom, if they have a diagnosis of autism, again, many of them are probably going to be speaking students, but when they get really stressed or in overwhelmed, just certain situations, they may become more of a non-speaking or limited speaking individual. So you kind of need to be very aware of that as well. But again, non-speaking is kind of the preferred language with that. And then another thing we're going to talk about, kind of vocabulary, is stimming. So stimming are those behaviors that you might see where a person's kind of hand flapping, rocking, swaying, walking on their tiptoes. It could be feeling certain objects. To be honest, I watched a documentary about a young lady that went to college and everything, and she carried a spoon with her, and she would kind of wave it. She liked the way it would catch the sun, the way it felt of the metal, things like that. So it may seem like, quote unquote, an odd object to some of us, but that was just a comfort object to them. And stimming really are kind of a positive thing for the individual. It soothes them. It's purposeful for them. We'll watch a video here in a minute where a young lady kind of explains it more. And when you think about it, like me, when I'm sitting, especially in maybe like a lecture or some type of class, I'm often fidgeting, whether it's shaking my leg, bouncing my knee. I have a habit of playing with my ring on my finger. Some people are pen clickers. So again, we have these behaviors, but those have just been normalized where we don't think about them, to where some of these other behaviors that an autistic individual may do, like hand flapping, have not yet been normalized as much. I was recently asked in a training kind of what's the difference between stimming and kind of those obsessive compulsive behaviors. So thus, that's why I have that second one up there. And really, obsessive compulsive disorders and those who have OCD, it is really a distressing kind of unwanted behavior that they have, where they really have to repeat those behaviors. So again, where an autistic person is typically doing as a positive, soothing, kind of purposeful thing, there's just that difference there. So kind of like an example, somebody with OCD may repeatedly flick a light switch off and on, but they do it because they feel like if they don't do it, say 15 times, that something bad might happen. Now, an autistic person may flip the light switch back and forth, but they're doing it either because they like the sound of just the click click of the light switch going back and forth. They may like the visual feedback of the lights flashing off and on. So it's really a different purpose that they're doing it. And so sometimes I think it could be hard to know why an individual's doing it if you're not familiar with what their diagnosis is and not having conversations with them. But I would really kind of maybe watch and try to figure out, is it kind of a positive soothing type thing, or do they seem distressed and kind of unwanted? And so that's kind of the difference between stimming and obsessive compulsive behaviors. So here's a little video where Flick will kind of explain stimming just a little bit more.
Right, Flick. What's stimming?
So stimming is short for self-stimulatory behavior. So basically it's when you're kind of repetitively tapping into a sense. But yeah, we've got all our fidget toys here to demonstrate. Got the sort of cliched autistic stims like flapping and rocking and, maybe even sort of spinning.
Yeah, hair twirling.
Hair twirling, definitely. Yeah. And then ones that maybe aren't so movement based. So things like, kind of watching lights or little raindrops going down the window. Yeah. And then you've got like humming and things like that. echolalia and palilalia, so loads of different ways that you can stim.
And as long as it's not harming you or others, then stimming is perfectly safe, right?
Yeah, there's so many good reasons that we stim. It can aid with memory, it can also help with concentration an awful lot. Stimming can help with regulation, sort of emotional regulation, but also from a sensory point of view as well. And it's just jolly fun.
It's so much fun.
It's just fun.
All right, so what exactly is autism? Well, here on this graphic, I love that it's a triangle, and if we were in person, you would see me kind of holding up my fingers in a triangle shape. There are three kind of main characteristics that go with a diagnosis of autism. And so that first area is that social interaction, which is at the top of the pyramid that you're looking at. So when you look up there, it says the person may appear unresponsive, they may be absent or have unusual eye contact, gestures, or expressions, does not spontaneously share interest or joy, and doesn't seem to make friends with peers as easily. Also know there might be some differences in their pragmatic language, kind of understanding those social rules, social engagement, knowing how to start, maintain, and end those conversations. They're often bluntly honest because they're very black and white. So kind of that, honey, do these jeans make me look fat type comments. They may not know that you should always say no, they look fabulous on you. They're going to be like, yeah, you need to go get some other jeans, which some people may really appreciate, but sometimes that can come off as rude, but it's really just they don't, again, understand those social rules and expectations sometimes. They do have those difficulties making and maintaining friendships and understanding all the unwritten and kind of hidden rules that just go into relationships. So again, social interactions are going to be an area that they have some differences in. Another area of the triangle is the communication area. So that's going to be in your lower left-hand corner. And so there on the graphic, you see they have that unusual or repetitive language, delay or impoverished language development, cannot initiate or sustain that conversation, does not play make-believe or pretend. So again, I think eye contact is one that everybody kind of thinks of. They often won't make direct eye contact. It's almost painful for them, as I've talked to some individuals that that's a challenge for. They, again, may have be a non-speaking individual and have to use some other type of device, often called AAC or augmentative alternative communication, and that can be low-tech, high-tech things. Again, they have a really hard time with, they take everything very literal. So again, understanding those nuances are going to be challenging. They're going to have difficulty with small talk. Like they're not going to understand why we're making that small talk. They're kind of like, let's get to the meat of what the conversation is. So I'm here for class. Let's talk about chemistry. I don't care how the weather is. I don't care, again, what's new album has come out or whatever. Those are just not important things to them. They're there to kind of go down their checklist of making their tasks get done. Like I said, I would just kind of remind you, for those that are normally speaking individuals, that in stressful, or if they become unregulated, they may actually become a non-speaking or limited speaking individual. So just kind of be mindful of that. And then the third part of that triangle is those restrictive activities and interests. So they may have a preoccupation with a narrow interest. They may have those unusual or repetitive gestures or action. Very rigid routines. Again, this is where we see they're very, very schedule-based. They don't like variation from the norm. And they have fascination with object parts. So they may not necessarily focus on the whole thing, but just a small part of something. Some of those preoccupations, just in my experiences, I actually had a very young boy, he was second grade, but I could walk into his classroom, and if he saw my keys hanging out of my pocket, he could go, "Oh, Miss Belfield, you drive a blah, blah, blah that has an engine and has this and that," and all these things that were way above me, because I am not a mechanically inclined person. I kind of drive my car from point A to point B. I don't know anything about the inner workings, but this young man, just from seeing my key, could tell me everything about it, and you could lay just about any key in front of him and he could do that. So that's kind of one of those preoccupations and narrow interest fields, but again, kind of looking at it from that strength-based view. What career fields could he go into, whether, again, it's an auto mechanic, an auto salesman. I'm sure there's a lot of jobs in the auto market that he would be a good candidate to look for as he continues to get older and kind of expand his interest a little bit. Again, they can perseverate on some behaviors. We already kind of talked about they really have a preference for routine and structure. They have trouble kind of letting go of ideas, kind of like I spoke of earlier. They're very black and white thinkers. So if you give them a rule, so to speak, and say, this is how we always do it, but then something changes that day and we have to do it something a little bit different, they really have a hard time kind of letting that go, because you said we should do it this way. And so sometimes when they've got those preconceived ideas, again, they really have a hard time letting it go. They can really focus in on one idea, kind of like my young man with the cars. If we're in math class and we start talking about something else, he may constantly try to bring it back to cars because that's what his mind is on. And so it can be hard to get them to open up to other things. Individuals with autism also have a difficulty kind of understanding that concept of finished, or they have a hard time moving on to a new activity if they haven't deemed that they have finished the first thing that they were working on. So really just kind of setting very clear expectations of what finished is, or how long you're going to work on an activity, will really help them. So those are the three main areas, but there are a few other areas that are going to be impacted or could be impacted for an autistic individual. So some of those areas are cognitive. Again, they prefer order. They can be over-selective. They can have difficulty with time management, have uneven skill development, difficulty problem solving, or sometimes they're really good at problem solving. Again, it's really hard. Up there on the bullet points on the third one, you see if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, which really just means we're talking about all of these characteristics, but it's going to vary from person to person, and their strengths and weaknesses are going to be different from person to person. Again, not much different than us as a neurotypical individual. If you're listening to this and you're neurotypical, we have different strengths and weaknesses. It's the same thing for an autistic individual. Their communication is not all going to look the same. It's going to vary from person to person. Another area that can be impacted is academics. So again, they can have extensive knowledge in a narrow area of interest. They often have a strong rote memory skill set. They typically have strong decoding skills, but they're a little bit weaker with their comprehension skills. They know a lot of facts and details, but they may have difficulty with that abstract reasoning, difficulty applying those new skills in new situations. Like they know how to apply it to what was taught, but now to take that information and apply it to a new or novel situation may be difficult for them, and they may be easily distracted. Another area that may impact them is that emotional vulnerability. So again, they can be easily stressed, worry, kind of obsessively about things. They may have some unusual fear responses, difficulty tolerating mistakes. I will say many autistic individuals that I have worked with are kind of very much perfectionists. And so they have a really hard time tolerating mistakes. And so we've had to do a lot of kind of almost setting them up or modeling for them that everybody makes mistakes and that it's okay that you can typically fix a mistake and still move on. They've got difficulty identifying, expressing, and controlling their emotions. They have that low frustration tolerance. And so they can just kind of get overwhelmed with things and sometimes have some meltdown reactions because of that. And also sometimes autistic individuals have some motor deficits. So they may have some poor motor coordination, an awkward gait, unusual body posture. A lot of individuals with autism have poor core muscles, so that can go into the poor body postures. They can have difficulties with certain movements, facial expressions, handwriting. Is usually not one of their favorite things and can be really a challenge for them. So they will really resist or even refuse handwriting or other fine motor tasks. So again, autism incorporates a lot of different things. Again, like I said earlier, it really affects their life across their lifespan. And so you need to be mindful of all these things. But again, going back to when you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So I'm going to challenge you to get out and meet as many autistic individuals as you can, just so that you can see the different variations. And they're just great people. I love spending time with them. So, as I said earlier in the opening, when I first got the call about doing this training, it was from the security and safety office at one of our community colleges. And like I said, they were getting some calls. And so we have included some kind of other videos in here. And so we are going to watch this video. And this is a real life video from a police officer's uniform camera. I do want to kind of preference this video that it can be a little triggering. So just kind of be warned with that. Also kind of want to give you some background. In this particular area of Arizona where he was patrolling, there had been a lot of crime and violence in the area, and so they'd really been working with the community to call in any, again, odd, unusual, suspect behavior. And so there was this young man that had been out walking around a park, and so he is kind of bouncing a lot when he's walking. Again, for those of you that have been around autistic individuals, you may have kind of seen that bounce in their step that some of them will have. And this particular young man had a little red string that he would twirl in his fingers, and he would kind of hold it up. And so the officer that had drove by a couple times to kind of check out the scene couldn't really see what was in his hand, but did see him kind of with his hand close to his face and what he thought was smelling his hand. And then he would notice the individual's head kind of tilt back. And so he wasn't sure, again, what was going on. So as we watch this video, I really don't want you to focus on the police officer and what he's doing. I really want you to focus on the young man, and I want you to see what characteristics of autism you see as this video plays out. So again, watch the video, really kind of focus on what behaviors you see from the young man that are characteristics of autism and should have been those hints of autism. And so let's get this video playing. Again, I will give you, it does get a little loud at parts, so like I said, just a little trigger warning.
What's going on? Yeah, what are you doing? What are you doing?
I'm stimming.
What?
How you doing with this?
What is that? Stop walking away from me.
It's a string.
Okay, so why are you bouncing around all over? You have any ID on you?
No.
Don't go anywhere. Alright, just relax.
Are you okay? Are you okay? I'm okay. I'm okay. Ah! Ah! Ah!
Stay down.
I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay.
Don't move.
Okay.
You understand?
No, I'm okay. Help!
Stop moving!
I'm okay.
Don't you move, you understand?
Yeah. I need help.
Don't move.
I need help.
Don't stop moving.
Am I gonna go away?
Relax.
I'll breathe.
You are breathing.
Yeah. Okay, I'll clap and lay down. I'm okay.
Stop moving.
Am I gonna go away? Are you gonna go away?
Just relax.
What are you doing? Hey, what are you doing?
Just relax, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so what were some characteristics that you saw as you watched that video? So some things that hopefully you kind of noticed was there at the beginning of the video, the young man seemed to have some difficulty understanding the officer's question. Like the officer was saying, "What are you doing?" And he actually had to repeat it, I think, about 3 times. And then the young man did respond. I know it was hard to hear it right there at the very beginning, but he does tell the officer that he was stimming. So again, he kind of used that keyword. This video actually goes on for about 20 minutes in total. And so the officer later does say that he wasn't familiar with that word stimming. So that's one reason we try to share it in our trainings and make sure that people understand. And he further even kind of showed the officer that piece of string. He definitely seemed to struggle understanding some of those social rules of an interaction with an officer. And that was kind of demonstrated there again at the beginning when he kind of turned and started to walk away from the officer when the officer asked about him having an ID. Also noticed a lot of repeated language such as "I'm okay" or "I need help." Again, you could tell that there was difficulty understanding the social situation as the young man kept kind of asking questions like, "Am I going to go away? Are you going to go away?" Towards the end part of that video that we saw, there seemed to be a learned script or procedure. So like when the officer says to relax, the young man says, "I'll breathe, I'll calm down, I'm okay." Excuse me, "I'm okay." So again, there were some things. So again, just looking for those characteristics that might help clue us in that an individual is on the spectrum, and therefore how we might respond to them will be a little bit different. And we'll talk about that in another little video. There's kind of an example of some things that could be done. So just know, I mean, obviously safety and security on campuses is of utmost importance. You know, if there is a concern, you absolutely need to make a phone call. But I also kind of urge you to, if you know the students on, autistic, you may go have an interaction with them if you know them personally. Or when you call the security office, you may share that you suspect the person's on the spectrum just so that they're aware, because they are not shared that information from the accessibilities office. But it just really helps everybody when they know what's going on in a situation as early on as possible and how they might be able to interact with that situation. So on these next few slides, we're gonna kind of look at some things. And again, with the Kentucky Autism Training Center, we are very big at trying to listen to those autistic voices and what they say. And so this information is straight from the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, which is an amazing group. And so this is something you might either research for yourself, or again, if you've had a student that has disclosed with you that they are autistic, you might share this website with them. So the first thing that they say is, we think differently. Now, again, on this list, they acknowledge, kind of like I said before, that when you meet one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So they know this is not every autistic person, but this is a lot of autistic people. Like, there was a large group of them that kind of came up with this list. So again, they're acknowledging that they may have very strong interests in things that other people don't understand or even don't seem to care about. Again, I've had some individuals, several individuals that were very into vacuum cleaners. I don't know why, that was just their thing. And so again, for other people that may not understand or seem to care about it, it was a passion of theirs. But they might be, again, great problem solvers. They pay close attention to detail. It might take them longer to think about things. Their processing time is typically a little bit slower. They might have trouble with executive functioning, like figuring out how to start or finish a task, how to move on to a new task, how to make a decision. You'd be very surprised how many autistic individuals, sometimes their decision-making abilities were taken away from them by the individuals that were around them because they didn't give them that wait time, and therefore the individual really never learned that skill. So we need to give them that time. Routines are so very, very important for them. It can be hard for them to deal with those surprises or unexpected changes. So please, if you have a routine and structure and something is going to change, give them as much warning as you possibly can. I know that's sometimes hard. And again, kind of when I was talking to the security office, this was an example that they actually shared with an individual. There had been some inclement weather, so campus was closing early. But for this young person, their routine was to wait in the lobby of this specific building until their ride came and got them. Well, the person, because of campus closing early, was needing to lock up the building, and so they had asked the individual to please move out and that they could wait out on the patio area. And of course, the autistic individual's like, no, this is where I have to wait. And so it just was a hard situation because nobody had prepared either individual for that. And so with a little bit of planning and a little bit of just sharing information, that situation may have gone a little bit smoother. When they do get overwhelmed, they do have difficulty being able to process their thoughts, feelings, and surroundings, which can make them lose control of their body. And then they process their senses differently. So with senses, I just want you to take a minute, and I do this in a lot of my trainings, and look at your forearm for a minute and draw a 1-inch box on your arm. Now, imagine for a neurotypical person, we have about 1,000 nerve endings in that 1-inch square on our arm. And so that's kind of how we tactilely experience the world. But for artistic individuals, they may be hyper or hyposensitive. Now, it's not that they have more nerve endings in that same 1-inch square, but that's how their brain perceives it. So the best way for me to explain it is to kind of in the nerve endings part. So for somebody who's extra sensitive to those things, imagine instead of just 1,000 nerve endings, you had 10,000 nerve endings. How might a slight brush against you feel? How might the wind blowing against you feel differently? And oftentimes when I'm in an interactive audience, I have somebody saying it would feel like a sucker punch. It would feel, like a blow to the face, something like that. So yes, for somebody who really has that hypersensitivity, things that we may kind of take for granted as just a quote unquote normal feeling, because they feel it so intensely or their brain registers it so intensely, it is. And so I'll be honest, as a classroom teacher, those are those kids that, again, maybe they were passing somebody in the hallway and someone barely touched them, and the next thing I know, they're fell out in the hallway and they're like, oh my gosh, they just ran into me, and they seem so over dramatic. But in reality, that is how their body perceived that. It is how it felt to them. And so we need to realize that, and we need to think about that as we set up their environment. And then kind of on the other end of that, we have some people who, their sensitivity, they're hyposensitive, and so they don't feel things, or their brains don't register it as strongly as quote unquote a neurotypical person. So again, instead of 1,000 nerve endings in that 1-inch box, maybe there's only 100 nerve endings. And again, like I said, it's not that their nerve endings are actually less, but just the sensation and how it feels is that much less. And so these are the individuals that may put their hand on the stove and it's burning them, and they leave their hand there. We don't understand why they don't pull away. They may cut themselves and not realize that it's such a severe cut. I know a young man that had fell again at school. The school called the parents, let them know. They examined it, thought everything was fine. Mom came later, saw him, thought everything was fine. The next morning, Mom woke him up for school, and his whole leg was swelled up pretty nasty, and ended up he had broken a bone. And again, nobody had known it because his sensitivity to that pain was just so diminished. So again, here in this description they give you, it says we might be extra sensitive to things like bright lights, loud sounds. We might have trouble understanding what we hear or what our senses tell us. We might not notice we were in pain or hungry. We might do the same movement over and over. This is called stemming, and it helps us to regulate our senses. For example, we might rock back and forth, play with our hands, or hum. 3, they move differently. We might have trouble with fine motor or coordination. So we talked about motor skills a little earlier. It can feel like our mind and our bodies are disconnected. So with that, I had a young person who once kind of described to me that it almost felt like he was walking in outer space, like all the time, or in water. It's just like their body parts felt like they were floating all the time. So it can be hard for them to start or stop moving. Speech can be extra hard because it requires a lot of coordination. Again, those are things that we take for granted. We might not be able to control how loud our voices are, or we may not be able to speak at all, even though we can understand what other people are saying. And so again, that kind of feeds back into the communication thing of a lot of times they don't have that flexibility in their voice of being able to get excited and then kind of down to our normal pitch. And so they're very monotone. I've got a friend who worked with a student, and they had had a really good day, and at the end of the day the student walked up to her and said, "This was the best day of my life." But again, it was just a very flat, like, this was the best day of my life is what you would kind of expect. But for this student, they, again, just can't control how their voice kind of does that. And so it's hard to match what the student was really feeling to what their voice was telling the person he was talking to. They communicate different. We might talk using echolalia, which is that repeating things that they've heard before, or by scripting what they want to say. Some autistic people use augmentative and alternative communication devices to communicate. For example, we may communicate by typing on a computer, spelling on a letterboard, or pointing to a picture on an iPad. Some people may also communicate with behavior or the way that they act. Not every autistic individual can talk, but they all have important things to say. And I am a huge proponent for making sure that every individual has a voice. I know you guys are at the college level, but I worked really hard with our preschools to start getting them supports as early as possible. And again, knowing that some people may use some. Again, some days they may be speaking and able to do that just fine, and other days they may need some type of alternative augmentative communication device to help them communicate, and to just kind of go with that. And with those devices, like I said, there's a variety of them. There's some low-tech ones, and then there's some high-tech iPads and things like that to help them communicate. But it's just another communication style, much like a braille person, or I'm sorry, a blind person would use braille. A deaf person uses sign language. A non-speaking student would use some form of AAC. And then they socialize differently. Some of them may not understand or follow social rules that non-autistic people make up. They might be more direct than other people. Eye contact might make them uncomfortable. They might have a hard time controlling their body language or facial expressions, which can confuse non-autistic people or make it hard to socialize. Some of them may not be able to guess how people feel. This doesn't mean that they don't care how people feel. They just need people to tell them how they feel so that they don't have to guess. Some autistic people are extra sensitive to other people's feelings. So again, they care about other people just as much as anybody. They just have a hard time reading those social cues. So just because I'm smiling, I can't assume that they know that I'm happy with whatever they're doing. I need to actually verbalize to them, you made me happy when you did X, Y, Z. Make sure that they know how I feel. If they've upset me or hurt my feelings on something, I need to be very explicit with that. And so just trying to be as direct with them as possible. Again, remembering that they are very literal, very black and white, typically speaking. And so don't assume that they're going to pick up on those cues that you might be sending. They might need help with their daily living skills. It can take a lot of energy to live in a society built for non-autistic people. They may not have the energy to do some of the things that we do in our daily lives. Our part of being autistic can take things that they do too hard. They may need to help with things like cooking, doing their jobs, or going out. They might be able to do things on their own sometimes, and then other times need help. They might need to take more breaks so they can recover their energy levels. So again, it's going to vary from day to day. It's going to vary from individual to individual. Obviously, a day that they're feeling more unregulated, it may take more energy to get through some of the other things that they have to do. I've worked with a lot of students that were able to kind of manage through the school day pretty beautifully, and that we didn't see anything through the school day, but man, as soon as they got home, they kind of fell to pieces, and their parents and support people were like, they were in total meltdown with crying and meltdown. I mean, just full-on meltdown that can go on for quite a while at home. And a lot of times it's just because that person has used so much energy and resource through the day that then once they get home, they're in their comfort zone, so to speak, and so they may fall apart there. And so we just need to know, as individuals that support them, that they may need extra help in that. It's a great adaptive skill in a way that they've learned kind of where they can fall apart, and that it's safe, and where they need to, quote unquote, try to keep it together. I know my behavior and interactions are different in a professional work setting than when I'm at home. So that is kind of a natural thing, but it's just something that we need to be mindful to. And we can't just go, I know you know how to, because you've seen them do it before. We need to know that each day is different, and that it takes different energy sources for them. All right, so we've talked a lot about their characteristics. We've talked a lot about how they kind of interact with the world and things that they do. And so we watched that police video a little earlier. We're going to watch another one On this police video, this is a staged police video, and this is kind of the what should you do, how you should act and respond. As we watch this again, you're going to see a lot of characteristics of autism through the young person, but I really this time want you to focus a little bit more on the strategies and the interactions that are used with the individual, because the same thing that this police officer is doing as far as those strategies are things that you can use when you are interacting with an autistic individual. So try to take notice of what those strategies and tips are that they provide throughout this video for us.
Under the influence. Although there are many signs of autism, here are a few distinguishable symptoms that you could look for.
Hello, sir. How are you today?
Today.
Repetitive words, also known as echolalia, is one common symptom of someone with autism. Overstimulation is another common symptom of someone with autism. Loud noises, bright lights like the overheads on your patrol vehicle, and shiny objects will all distract someone with autism. Stimming is self-stimulatory. You may see someone with autism rubbing their hands and fingers together. You may also see them rocking in place.
Sir, you doing okay? You all right?
As you approach someone with autism, you may see intensified stimming. This is a symptom of high anxiety. If the situation permits, provide ample space between you and the person whom you're interacting with. If you do need to use open hand control with someone who is autistic, you can expect them to react with hypersensitivity that you may perceive as non-compliance. Prior to using open hand control or handcuffing, attempt to explain in detail what is about to occur.
I need you to put your hands behind your back.
This may reduce the chance of a negative reaction and possibly gain compliance.
I need to put these on you.
People who have been diagnosed with autism may be on prescribed medication. To determine whether the person is under the influence of drugs or alcohol or on their prescribed medication, try not to ask open-ended questions that could be misinterpreted by someone with autism.
Did you take anything today?
Be specific to get a more appropriate response.
Do you have meds that you take daily? Did you take them today?
Yeah.
Using short words and gestures will greatly assist in communicating with the person you're speaking with.
ID? Johnny?
It may be necessary to allow someone with autism extra time to process your questions. Be sure to allow ample time for their response.
You're safe.
If the situation permits and you're able, reassure the person that they are not in danger and that you're only there to help them.
So what were some things, some strategies that you noticed that the police officer used this time to interact with this individual? And then hopefully these are strategies that you can use in your classroom as well. So hopefully some things that you noticed were to be mindful of that sensory input. Again, there's, 8 different sensory processes, and so we need to be mindful of those. Here in the video, the officer had the lights turned off because he felt like that was overwhelming or distracting the individual. So just in your classroom, that's something you might think about. Allow that stemming. There again, kind of that neuroaffirming, if I told you to stop shaking your leg while you were listening to this training right now, if you really were trying to stop, you might not be listening to what I'm saying because now you're focused so much on keeping your legs still. It's kind of that same thing for them. And again, it's helping them regulate their body. So allow that stemming. It's not hurting anyone. Provide them space. To just be. Use short, direct language and gestures, again, be it questions or statements that you're making. Just be very explicit in what it is that you're needing or wanting from them. Explain in detail what's going to happen. Again, this is really important if it's something out of the norm or that we're going to be changing the routine of what we have normally done. And then give that extra processing time. We are such a language-rich world, and we talk so much, and we just go from one topic to the next, that for individuals that have some processing difficulties, we don't give them time to really just process that. So again, these were all strategies that this police officer used in this video, but they're all things that we can use in our classrooms to help our individuals with autism as well. All right, so let's start talking about some more specific strategies for use in the classroom with our students. So the use of a syllabus. So again, kind of like with that officer, you want to try to keep your language in your syllabus as short and direct and easy to read as possible. If you can create charts with the assignments and the due dates listed, really just make it clear, the rubrics, the expectations, everything within that, to really just focus in on that. And then with your syllabus, I know sometimes life happens and dates have to change. Maybe it's a due date on an assignment. You've even given them less time or more time. Make sure that you make that change and you give them the ability to get a new updated syllabus so that it's written out for them. Assignments, again, same thing, kind of be very clear of your expectations. Don't just say them orally. Make sure that you write the instructions down for them as well so that they have that visual instruction. And I'll be honest, I kind of liken this to when I'm in church on Sundays and the pastor says, turn to Matthew 4 verses 17 through 27 or whatever. By the time I grab my Bible and I turn to Matthew, I'm usually looking at my husband going, what chapter did he say? What verse did he? Like, that information verbally fleets through our brains so quickly. But, of course, with modern technology now, many of our churches have projectors and stuff up there, and so it's often written up there so I can look and be like, okay, he said chapter 4, and it allows me to kind of follow and do that more. So just kind of be mindful of those same things. Again, we know they like routine, so what type of structures can I put within my classroom? What are my procedures for turning in assignments? Do I have that written down somewhere? Do I have it labeled? What are my procedures for going to the bathroom and taking care of other personal business like that? Am I going, oh, you're adults and you can just get up and go? Again, those things need to be written down and make sure that we stay as same as we can as we move through that. We talked earlier, handwritten assignments are not something that they enjoy. I know nowadays we do many things on computers, but really just kind of limit their handwritten assignments. And we'll talk a little bit more about that because I think while we don't give a lot of handwritten assignments anymore, we still expect a lot of note taking, and so we'll talk about that here in a minute. And I kind of already hit on visual instructions a little bit when I was talking about assignments, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next couple of slides as well. So here's where I was talking about we expect students to take notes while we're giving lectures, obviously. So I am going to propose to you, and again, this is really going to help all of your learners, not just your autistic learners, to start using guided notes as much as possible. So guided notes are instructor-prepared handouts that provide all students with that background information, the standard cues with specific spaces to write in those key facts, concepts, and relationships during the lecture. Guided notes require students to actively respond during the lecture. So right there, you now have some active engagement rather than just that kind of passive listening to improve the accuracy and efficiency of students' note-taking and increasing students' retention of course content. Guided notes, oops, there's a typo. Guided notes can help organize and enhance lecture content in any discipline or subject. So again, that's the great thing about guided notes is you can use them for anything. I do have a link there at the bottom that if you want a little bit more information about guided notes, it is there. So here are just some kind of visual examples of what guided notes could look like. So you kind of see it's got a lot of the information, but the students are having to listen for those key pieces to fill in the spots. And there on the war in the Pacific, you see there's even some other questions, list all that you see. What does the island in red signify? What does this tell you about the Japanese Empire? So you still kind of have some of those open-ended questions to make them think and reflect a little bit more. But you're really helping them to know what they need to key in on as they are listening to you lecture. Because for a lot of our students, again, you're giving them so much language, they just don't know what's important and what's not important. And so this kind of helps them with that. So guided notes, again, it really helps the student to produce complete and accurate lecture notes. Students who take accurate notes and study them later consistently receive higher test scores than students who only listen to the lecture and read the text. And again, that's backed up with that research there. Inaccurate or incomplete lecture notes are often limited value for subsequent study. Guided notes help level that playing field between students with and without good note-taking skills. So again, we don't want to penalize students just because they're not good note takers. So this helps with that. Guided notes also increase that student active engagement with that course content, which I know is something that every instructor really wants. So to complete their guided notes, students must actively respond to the lecture's content by listening, looking, thinking, and writing. Guided notes increase the students' active engagement with that course content. Oh, that's listed in there twice. Sorry. And again, there's another link down there that kind of helps with that information. So here's another example of some guided notes. So that top part, again, they're kind of filling in the box. And then that bottom part there, you've got some thought bubbles after learning about the war in the Pacific, indicate what each of the people would have thought. Make sure it's historically relevant. So again, they're kind of having to apply some of their knowledge in there, and there's a place for them to write a little summary. So again, just an idea that would be effective for really all of your students within your classroom. Guided notes would be a huge help. So let's look at some other strategies that will help your students. Prefer seating assignments. So again, like we said, we know some students have different sensory sensitivities. So preferential seating may help with that. If you have a student who tells you they have sensitive hearing, you might want to think about where you're setting them in the classroom. I went and set them real close to the air conditioner or the projector. If those are issues that they have, you know, again, I would probably put them as far away from those things as possible. If I have a student who I know needs to STEM a lot, excuse me, again, I need to give consideration of where I'm putting them. I had a student that really needed to pace a lot, so he often was in the back of the classroom so that he could get out of his seat, and he had a path that he could pace there in the back of the classroom that was not disruptive to the other students. If you've got a student that tends to hand flap a lot, you know, you probably don't want them on the front row because it may distract other students. And with that, that's a question that I get asked a lot too, is what about the other students who might be distracted about that? Again, it's all kind of about seat choices and setting that up. So if I have a student maybe with ADHD, so again, that hand flapping is really disruptive, I might put them on the front seat, and that student that hand flaps might be behind them or at the back row of that individual, to where they're not in eye line sight of each other, particularly for my ADHD student, but that I'm not impinging on my student that needs to hand flap to really be able to focus in on what I'm saying. So just really think about your seating options that you have and where you put people to best help all of their learning styles. Visual supports, we're going to talk about those a little bit more, but here in this example, you see the different colored notepads. Just know that visual supports can be very simple. It can be something as simple as those sticky notes, and, you know, different information is going on a different color. You know, also even there in the binder, how each subject is in a different color tab. Those are all types of visual support. If you use whiteboards in your classroom, you might always write your homework in the exact same spot so that that student knows where it is. And again, write it up there along with verbally saying it so that you have that visual support to go along with it. That syllabus that we talked about earlier, that's a type of visual support as well. So there's lots of things that we do. And if we're honest, we all count on visual supports. Again, I go out into the community a lot and give presentations, so I'm constantly looking for road signs. I'm looking for names of buildings. When I enter buildings, I'm scanning to look for the proper room, where the restrooms are, things like that. And all those signs are visual supports. You know, my calendar on my phone that I'm carrying, that's a type of visual support to make sure that I'm meeting all of my timelines and expectations and getting to appointments on time. So here are some other examples of visual supports, and again, we use these things in our daily life, so you kind of see the, you know, putting furniture together. Many of us do not actually read the words. We look at the pictures and the diagrams to see how things should go together. Recipes, just having the visual supports there. Many of us that cook prefer recipes that still have the visuals of what things should look like as we go through. We may not have every single step with a picture, but just kind of checks on learning almost to make sure, okay, this is going in the right direction. So again, within our classrooms, anything that we can do, whether it's a concept that we're teaching or a procedure in the classroom, if we compare that with some type of visual support, and here you kind of see that where they're doing something there with that cross section of that wood to do some things. So visual supports are a huge help and something that, again, really help everybody because we're all visual learners at the end of the day. Another way that you can help provide visual supports is simply providing videos. So here, you know, they've taken a pretty complex topic, like how do we launch things into space? You know, if I just kind of gave a lecture on that, it's a lot of information, a lot of technicalities, but simply having a video that can really demonstrate and kind of put that visual with the information will help make it much more concrete for the learner. All right, let's look at the strategies for collaborating with our students for success. So, allowing them to record, again, whether it's an audio recording or video recording, while they're in class may be very helpful for students. It does let them go back and hear the information again. Maybe when they were in class, again, maybe the air conditioner was extra loud that day, and so their sensory system was just overloaded, and so they really didn't hear everything that you said, even though they were present in class that day. So again, it gives them a chance to go back and listen or watch the lecture again. It lets them go back and pause it at key points to re-listen to just one section of it as many times as they need to. So recordings are very beneficial. Mentors. A lot of colleges have found success with actually pairing individuals with mentors. Just kind of another individual that is going through that college experience too, and so they can share some strategies and techniques that have worked for them. Everything, again, from organizing binders and homework assignments and managing all that to other things. If you have a cafeteria within your school, you'd be surprised how many students may not be going through the cafeteria line just because they don't know how to manage all of that. And so kind of having a mentor or a buddy that can help walk them through that and guide them through that, show them where certain things are on campus, can be very beneficial for them. And then the third bullet up there, of course, is counseling. Many of our community colleges have some great counseling services offered there on campus. So we need to make sure students know about those things. So again, as staff at the college, you can share that information, but again, mentors can kind of help even direct them there as well, because I know, just kind of like with KTC, there's a lot of resources that we have, but if for some reason people aren't utilizing those resources because they don't know they're available, it really doesn't matter how great our services and supports and stuff are. People need to be utilizing them. And it's the same thing, like I said, I know you guys have great counseling services out there, but we need to make sure that we're getting the right students to those services. All right, testing accommodations. Again, your accessibility office is going to kind of help navigate that for you. They'll determine what the appropriate testing accommodations are and working with that student and their exact diagnosis and whatnot. Just make sure that you understand those when they are brought to you. If you have questions, make sure that you're either talking to your accessibility office or have a conversation with the student. And again, really learn what they need, because obviously each class is so different. So what they need from class to class may look very different as well. Assistive technology. Again, technology has come so far. There's so many things that our computers and our phones can do for us now. So just kind of be aware of that. Be as flexible as you can with your students. They may already have a program that works for them. And so just kind of work within that for them because they're already going to be familiar with it. And then for some students, and again, this will be kind of part of those accommodations, you may need to provide textbooks in alternative ways, but again, your accessibility office will probably be helping you navigate that as well. Another great tool, like I said, guided notes are probably my #1 favorite, but graphic organizers would probably be my #2 favorite. So graphic organizers are simply a visual aid designed to help students organize and comprehend sizable amounts of text and content information, with the whole goal being that the students can more easily process information. So again, there's a link there that you can kind of go and get more information. Graphic organizers are flexible tools that can be used across many academic areas again. They are a visual aid to help support that understanding and comprehension, and they can be adapted for many students. So again, these are not just tools that your autistic students are going to benefit from, but tools that many students are going to benefit from. So graphic organizers, I mean, there's lots of different kinds. There's, just your simple T-charts and Venn diagrams, but it's anything that's, again, helping them kind of organize that information. Here, if you are going to give a lecture that goes with a lab, you really need to do that lecture in the lab environment to where you can actually pick up and show the things that you are explicitly talking about. It just allows for a much more detailed explanation of the procedures and will help the students be more actively engaged. It can be very abstract when you're kind of in more of a lecture setting, talking about that lab and telling them when they go in there, they'll see this. Why not just have them in that lab environment? Let them see exactly what you're talking about, where exactly it is, what exactly you want to do. Again, it's just much more explicit, and anytime we can be explicit, we want to be. So conduct those lectures in the lab environment when you're going to be expecting them to carry out the task within that lab environment. And it just allows for that more immediate application then. Some other strategies we can use, again, visual schedules, I kind of alluded to earlier. I use the calendar on my phone for everything. So again, I'm traveling the state a lot and going to lots of different counties and just different places. So my calendar keeps me up to date. That is my visual schedule. I'm not expected to have it all in my head. So again, use visual schedules with your students. Like I said, your syllabus could include a visual schedule of assignments, due dates, significant dates that they just need to be aware of. Mentors can help students with visual schedules of trying to kind of line out everything. Don't forget to reinforce for those appropriate and desired behaviors and activities. And know that reinforcing can be something as much as a high five, good job giving an explanation of how that chemical reaction happened. I mean, it can be those verbal things, but reinforcing them for doing the things that you really expect and want students to do. We all kind of like that pat on the back. I know in our trainings, when we talk about reinforcement, we often kind of tell people, like, how often would you keep coming to work if that paycheck didn't keep hitting the bank when it was supposed to? That paycheck is your reinforcement. In many ways, if that reinforcement stopped, you probably wouldn't keep coming to work so often. So we've got to make sure we're reinforcing students as well. And then this is always a biggie, and I always see lots of head nodding as we talk about this one. Be aware of idioms, sarcasm, jokes, just even your tone of voice, facial expressions, body language, gestures, all of those things. Again, our students are very black and white, so they're very literal. So they a lot of times don't get that sarcasm, they don't get the joke. Now, I've had some students that will tell great jokes, but again, they don't receive them well. And so sometimes that can be hard to kind of figure out, because you're like, oh, but they're telling jokes, they enjoy jokes, so I'm trying to tell jokes back to them. And that doesn't always work. So just be very aware of that interaction. you know, because again, you say it's raining cats and dogs outside, and they're looking outside, really looking for the cats and dogs, wondering why are they falling from the sky type thing. And the same thing like we had talked about with other communication things of that tone of voice, facial expressions. Just kind of be careful with the messages you're sending. Again, some are not going to pick up on that stuff, even though you're expecting them to. You know, when you kind of give that teacher look when people are talking and they're not supposed to, and you think they're just going to zip it, you just need to be very direct and walk over to the student, obviously respect their dignity. Hey, Johnny, I need you to be quiet right now. There's a lecture going on, or whatever the situation is. We also have to be mindful where a lot of our students kind of implicitly learn that hidden curriculum, a lot of those social expectations in particularly. Many times our students with autism do not learn those things implicitly, and so we have to explicitly teach it. And I know that's probably really hard at the college level because that's not something you guys are as used to doing. So make sure that you're reaching out with your counselors and again, your other resources within your campus. Don't just kind of keep it all bottled up and be frustrated or allow the other students to become frustrated. Some common ones that I kind of hear about is again, physical touch. Again, those students with autism, may not always know what type of physical touch is appropriate or not appropriate. Hugging. Some of them come from K-12 schools that allowed them to hug every single individual that walked by, and then they get in a college campus where, you know, people are like, don't hug me, you don't know me, I don't know you. And so again, they may need some explicit instruction in that. And then of course, how to handle frustration and anger. So again, don't let those things get bottled up. Make sure you're reaching out to your services that are available there, and just know those students are going to need some explicit instruction in those areas. So here's just some other guidance with that. Given their tendency to be literal, there's no wonder that most students with autism have difficulties understanding those subtle, unwritten rules that guide and dictate that social behavior in different contexts, because again, they don't understand, well, I can do it here, but I can't do it there. Those hidden skills have to be formally taught to students with autism, while other students typically just learn them by watching their peers. Be specific when you're giving that instruction. So instead of saying something like clean up the science lab, you really need to say put the microscopes on the shelf. Instead of, hey class, go ahead and work on your projects for the last 30 minutes of class, you need to say, if you haven't already, I need you to write down all the resources you will need for your social studies paper during this 30 minutes. When you're giving something like this multi-step direction of get out your literature book, turn to page 37, get out your pencil and paper, you may want to just kind of bullet point on the board as you're saying that. Literature book, page 37, pencil, paper. So that they kind of have that visual to go with them. Just really think about those common classroom procedures that you may have, and be sure that you're kind of teaching those things so that they know what to expect in your classroom. Everybody's classroom is going to be different, and again, I know at college it's a little bit different than in a K-12 setting, but still kind of think about them, what stays the same, and make sure that you're explicitly teaching that, because again, that can kind of go into that hidden curriculum sometimes. And then we've talked a lot about stimming, and so this is kind of the same thing. Let them fidget. So, you know, we have different type of things. These are those like calming textured stickers that people can kind of rub and fidget on. And here you see some textured things here on the student's desk. So again, they will have their own materials, but if they have them, let them use them. It's going to help keep them regulated and help them be able to pay attention to what it is that you're teaching them. So KCTCS has lots of different things available, but obviously each campus is a little bit different. So be sure to check the website for the campus that you serve and see what you guys have available. Also, find out who your accessibility service counselors are. Get to know them, make those connections. They're really going to be able to help you as you start having more and more students with autism in your classrooms. And they're just a great resource. I will say, I told you I worked with one local campus, and so I'd asked them kind of what their autism numbers are. And so currently 20 to 25% of the students registered with their accessibility office has identified as autistic, but they know that they have a lot more on campus that have not yet self-identified for them to be able to help and support in those manners. So again, I mean, that's a quarter of the students bare minimum. So just know these students are out there. If you haven't had them in your classroom, they are coming. So we need to be prepared and we need to be accepting and make the accommodations that are needed for them. I will say, if a student has disclosed to you that they have a disability, it's every staff member's responsibility to make sure that they kind of explain to that student the benefits of connecting with the accessibilities office, kind of reassure them that just speaking with their office doesn't obligate them to everything, but they are really there to help them level the playing field. It will not provide them an advantage, but just help level that playing field, and it is something that they're entitled to, so make sure that they know. Again, you may even offer to walk over with them if time allows, or if they have a mentor, again, that may be somebody that helps take them over there, because going to an unfamiliar place to talk to unfamiliar people might be difficult for them. If a student mentions they have an IEP or a 504 while they were like in high school, again, I would use these steps and try to get them connected with the accessibilities office. If a student has not disclosed, so they haven't just come and told you that they have autism or that they had an IEP or 504, but again, you're seeing some of those characteristics that kind of put up those red flags, if you will, you might consider mentioning the Accessibility Services Office within the context of other campus resources, kind of like when you're telling them about the tutoring offers and other ways that they can get connected with campus. You just may mention the Accessibility Service Office within that, and then kind of use that opportunity to explain how the Accessibility Service Office can help with the barriers that they're experiencing if the student is eligible, because of course you can't guarantee that they would be eligible. Many of these accommodations are things that hopefully you are familiar with, because they are very common accommodations that are available through the KCTCS system. So access to course materials, alternative forms of textbook, of course American Sign Language, interpretive services, assistive technology, closed captioning, extra time to complete those assignments or exams, exams needing to be read orally, dictated, or typed, note-taking assistance, a quiet space for taking tests, readers, recording those lectures, scribe services, and then other services as needed and determined by their team. Some other campus resources, just to be familiar with them. Most campuses have a counseling center, so they do the academic, personal, and they have crisis interventions available there. There is usually an experimental learning center, which you can do some career exploration, internship, and job opportunities are there. Resume and interview assistance is available, mentoring and coaching. Some of our campuses have the TRIO Support Center, which has academic advising and intervention supports, free tutoring supports. Again, the Teaching and Learning Center, which has free tutoring in math, English, writing, computers, learning strategies, test-taking skills, and critical thinking skills. And then, of course, every campus has campus safety. Again, if you know an individual has autism and they've disclosed that to you, I would really encourage you to encourage them to go connect with the campus of safety. Again, the Accessibilities Office can't just go tell campus safety, hey, here are the students on our campus who have autism. Those individuals have to self-disclose, but it really just helps the campus safety personnel to know that information. And it's just kind of a win-win thing. I mean, when we do our first responder training, we tell those individuals to get out and meet as many autistic individuals in their community. So that's really important that they kind of do connect and get to know each other for lots of reasons. And then, of course, the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation can help provide lots of things, but assistive technology being one of the big things there on campus. And then, I'm sorry, the formatting's a little funny on this slide, but some Kentucky resources that we have for support is the Kentucky Advisory Council on Autism. So their website is provided. The Innovative Support for Autistic Workers, and so their website. And then, of course, our website, the Kentucky Autism Training Center, is listed, but you can also just plug in kyautism.org and get there as well. So those are just some Kentucky resources. And then some national resources for support. You heard me mention on several of our slides earlier the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, so their website is provided. The Job Accommodations Network, and their website is provided. The Organization for Autism Research, this link will take you specific to their College Central section of there, because they do a lot of great work across a variety of areas. And then the Association of Higher Education and Disability, and their website is listed there. Again, Kentucky Autism Training Center, we do a ton of things. Training is really the core of what we do, which is part of why we are doing this video today. But we do in-person trainings as well. We help provide supports, resources. So I really encourage you to check out our website, our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, Twitter, X, whatever it's called these days. Lots of social media ways to connect with us and stay up to date on information that we put out. Again, my name is Tracy Belfield. My email address is there on the screen. If you have any questions, concerns, anything like that, please reach out to me and I will help either answer your question, direct you to a resource that will help you. We'll figure it out together. I don't promise to have all the answers, but I will get you connected and in the right direction if I do not know the answer. So I really want to thank you all for participating in today's webinar / recorded training. It was great having you. We really take your feedback seriously, so if you will please scan the QR code or go to that bit.ly.ktc online 24 and fill out the survey and just let us know what you think so that we can move forward on improving our programming. I would really, really appreciate it. It will ask for my name, so I have that up there again for you, Tracy Belfield, and it will ask for the name of the training. You can just put KCTCS Reframing Autism in there. So yeah, hopefully you learned some things that you'll be able to apply to your job there on campus. Again, if you have any questions, reach out, tracy.belfield@grec.org. And you can always go to our website, kyautism.org. Thank you so much for everything. You guys have been great.